Hey everyone, welcome to Tips and Tea with Linnea FNP. My name's Linnea Baker, and I'm very excited to get to be with you guys today to cover an important topic, one that I get from a lot of people, a lot of questions on this, something I've had personal experience with, and something that even recently I had questions about from clients. So I thought, why not cover this? And we're going to talk about the gluten dilemma, because there's a lot of buzz around that nowadays, in the last few years even. So thank you so much for your time, and we're going to jump right in. So let me just ask you a quick question. How many of you have heard of gluten, right? It's such a buzzword nowadays. How many of you know someone who avoids gluten? I bet many of you do, or maybe you even avoid gluten yourself. Such a hot topic right now. And truly, just a few decades ago, gluten was largely unknown to the public. Think about it. When I was a kid, even in college, and in my 20s, nobody was talking about gluten. I wouldn't have known what people were talking about. It wasn't something we were aware of or center of attention. But now it's the center of many dinner debates. It's the center of topic of conversation at doctors' visits, and it's a booming billion-dollar industry with gluten-free products. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of that when you go shopping nowadays, right? So what happened? What made this shift? How did protein that humans have consumed for over 10,000 years suddenly become a villain in our diets? Why do so many Americans today suffer from gluten intolerance, sensitivity, or celiac disease when once gluten was a dietary staple? And more importantly, why does gluten cause inflammation and so many symptoms of discomfort in so many people? So today, these are the questions we're going to explore. We're going to dive into the science, the history, and some possible explanations of this gluten mystery. So hang on. Today, I'm drinking my detox tea, and I am ready. So for thousands of years, guys, gluten was an essential part of human diets. It's found in grains like wheat, barley, and rye. It's the building blocks of breads and pasta and beer. And just imagine ancient farmers in the Fertile Crescent, that's modern day Iraq and Syria. They were harvesting their wheat fields. They likely had no idea that this plant was going to feed civilizations and sustain empires. So fast forward through history, wheat and its derivatives have powered economies, built cities, and shaped cultures. Bread was even referred to as the staff of life. Gluten, which is a combination of two proteins, gliadin and glutenin, was not considered harmful. And in fact, gluten is what gives dough its elasticity and that chewy texture that we love in baked goods, right? So if gluten was a dietary staple for so long, why are we suddenly having trouble with it now? And that's the million-dollar question, right, guys? So to answer that question, we first need to look at the growing awareness of gluten-related disorders. Celiac disease is one of the most well-known conditions connected to gluten. And in people with celiac disease, the immune system mistakes gluten as a threat, and it attacks the lining of the small intestine. This leads to malabsorption of nutrients, digestive distress, and long-term health problems. I've had kids even in my pediatric clinic that were sent out to a GI specialist and diagnosed with celiac disease and told that, gluten is considered a poison for them and they have to avoid it because of the serious consequences and complications of eating it. But here's the kicker. Celiac disease was relatively rare. 50 years ago, doctors diagnosed it about 1 in 5,000 people. But today, Americans are diagnosed 1 in 100. Isn't that crazy? Mind-blowing, right? Then we have gluten sensitivity, which is even more puzzling, right? Because these individuals are negative for a celiac disease test, but they still experience symptoms like bloating and headaches and fatigue after they consume gluten. And in fact, research suggests that between 6 and 10% of the population may have some form of a non celiac gluten sensitivity. And I would say in the United States, that's even higher based on my experiences working with clients. And really, guys, so what changed? Why is it happening now and primarily in Western countries like the United States? That's the question. And it's not just the gluten itself that's the problem, but we now grow these foods as it's how we now grow these foods, as well as how we've changed the gluten containing foods we eat. So a lot of different things now than if you look back to our ancestors. So if we go back in time, this time we're not going as far back as ancient civilizations, but if we go to the Industrial Revolution, the 19th and 20th centuries actually transformed the way we grow and process wheat. So the wheat that our ancestors actually ate was very different from the wheat we consume today. Actually, in the mid 20th century, scientists developed new strains of wheat to increase yield and provide resistance to disease or improve resistance to disease, for the wheat crops. We wanted more of them and we wanted them to be resistant to diseases. So these were called dwarf wheat and they are genetically modified wheat crops. This was known as the Green Revolution, and it was a major achievement that helped feed millions of people. So it was to feed the need of the rising population and make sure there was enough food. However, these new strains of wheat also had higher gluten content, making them ideal for industrial scale baking. Okay, so several things happened then. At the same time, we had advances in food processing, which dramatically altered the way we consume wheat. So bread, which was once baked slowly in local bakeries using natural fermentation, was now mass produced in factories. And the fermentation process actually breaks down gluten proteins. That actual fermentation process that's breaking down the gluten proteins was actually shortened or eliminated altogether. And as a result, the gluten in modern bread is more difficult to digest. So that makes sense, right? But it doesn't stop there. Additives like vital wheat gluten are now used to improve texture, shelf life, and the overall structure of baked goods. And this extra gluten is added to everything from bread to sauces to even salad dressings, guys. Also, we need to mention that bread is in the United States is loaded with sugar. Refined white sugar is a known inflammatory food, and bread made in the United States is made with bleached flour as well as lots of preservatives and fillers. And these are not allowed in European countries. These ingredients, many of them are banned in European countries. So when you read a food ingredient label from the US versus Europe, the ingredients are drastically different. The European label ingredients can be understood and oftentimes made in your kitchen with ingredients you would have in your house. But that same product in the US cannot be made in your kitchen, and most of the ingredients are not known to consumers. Guys, I've traveled to overseas. I've had been blessed to be able to travel. My son was military. My son is active duty military. My husband was active duty military. And I have traveled all over and I can eat things in other countries. They taste different. They're fresher. They have less ingredients in them and they don't make me sick or flare up my autoimmune disease. But those same foods in the United States, I get sick from. It's incredible the difference. And also, if you look at the ingredient labels, and you can Google it and look at images of ingredient labels on different products sold both here and in Europe, and you'll see the difference in the ingredient label because those products are not allowed to be sold the same way they are in the United States because many of the ingredients in them are restricted and banned in Europe. So in order to be sold over there, they had to change the ingredients and take things out. Guys, I also had an Italian student stay with us for college for a while, and she complained of the sweetness of the bread because of all the sugar in it. They don't have that in Europe. I've also had several friends from Europe that have moved to the United States and have reported becoming sick, tired, bloated, and gaining weight when eating American foods over American food here in our country versus what the same foods or similar foods they would eat overseas in Europe from their country. So it's just something to think about. I can go out of the country and oftentimes eat breads and pastas and things that would make me feel so awful in the United States, and I don't have a problem. So things are different the way we the things that we put in our foods in the United States. And when we know better, we can do better. And you know, guys, when I go shopping and grocery shopping, I don't look at I look at ingredients. I go straight to the ingredient label. I don't look whether it says gluten-free, non-GMO, organic. Those are great, but I actually go to the ingredient label, and I'm not worried about calories and carbs and all that. I want to know what's the ingredients in the food to know if it's a high quality food that is good for me or not. And that's what I want you guys to do, is just to be informed and learn how to read the ingredient labels and learn how to listen to your body and see which foods are triggering you and which foods are serving you. So next, guys, we want to zoom into the gut. And remember, the gut is known as the second brain because of the profound influence it has over that gut-brain connection that's communicating back and forth. But I also like to call the gut the command center of the body because it's connected to our overall health and wellness. So not only the second brain and all the impact it has with mental health and sleep and focus and just mental clarity, but also the impact it has on our immune system and our metabolic system, to include our hormones and metabolism. It's incredible, the research that's out there from decades. I mean, we have research over 2 decades worth of research that is backed by science. It's evidence-based, and it shows us the importance of the gut. And we're learning more and more about the gut microbiome and how it impacts our health every few months. I feel like I learn more, and it's still growing. It's a huge field in research right now that we are learning so much from. But when it comes to celiac disease, when someone is actually with celiac disease and they consume gluten, we said their immune system launches an attack, damaging the lining of the small intestine. But even for those people without celiac disease, gluten can still trigger inflammation in the gut. And that's what I was talking about. I don't have celiac disease, but it creates inflammation in my gut when I eat gluten products in the United States versus gluten products in Europe. And really, people who have certain chronic conditions, such as autoimmune disease like myself, or irritable bowel syndrome, to name a few, they can be especially sensitive to gluten. But I think that these chronic conditions have these inflammatory triggers in general. And so they're more noticeable, that when you eat inflammatory foods that trigger you, you're going to notice it more because you have these chronic diseases that will alert you. You're going to have pain and maybe changes in your bowel and stomach discomfort and things if it's irritable bowel. So I actually have quite a few clients with autoimmune disease and different irritable bowel type syndromes that have thrived with some things we've done to improve their gut health and remove inflammatory triggers and foods from their diet. So really, typically the gluten foods in the US are ultra processed on top of being genetically modified and loaded with sugars. And that can actually lead to a leaky gut and inflammation in the body, separate from having chronic inflammation and separate from these chronic diseases. It can actually create the leaky gut and the inflammation in the body. And some people are just more resilient, but like, you know, many people, we get older and we have less reserves, and it hits us around 40, right? When lots of things are changing in our body. And other people can notice it sooner. I noticed my daughter's only 20, and we noticed that she has trouble with inflammation when she eats dairy and when she eats more of refined white sugar. So she is being more cautious with that because she has noticed the difference, even though she eats really healthy overall. So even young people can see this. So leaky gut syndrome occurs when the lining of the intestine becomes permeable, allowing undigested food particles, toxins, and bacteria to actually pass into the bloodstream. They're called tight junctions that are connected to keep the spaces between the cells closed, so that food has to go through and filter through the cell. But when you have leaky gut, those tight junctions have spaces, and that's how they leak around the cell instead of going through the cell. Kind of like having a bad coffee filter where the coffee grinds get through, but you just want the coffee to filter through. Kind of a similar idea. Dr. Mark Hyman is a functional medicine doctor that talks about that. So for many people, gluten can actually increase the production of a protein called zonulin, which regulates that permeability of the gut lining. So what goes in and out and keeps those tight junctions together. So more zonulin actually equals a leakier gut, and a leakier gut leads to more inflammation. So inflammation in the gut doesn't just stay there, guys. It can lead to systemic inflammation affecting everything from your skin to your brain, right? Infects your immune system, can affect your hormones and metabolism, so many things. And some people will actually experience brain fog, joint pain, and even autoimmune conditions that may be linked to their body's inflammatory response to gluten. Not just gluten, there's lots of toxins in things in general, even in our water and in the air we breathe, but one of them can be the gluten in the United States specifically. And especially if you have celiac disease, that's a no-go. Gluten has to be completely removed. There is no room for, no margin for even a little bit of gluten if you have celiac disease. And beyond gluten, another factor contributing to this issue is our modern diet, guys. We live in an era where processed foods are everywhere. These foods are often packed with artificial ingredients, preservatives, and sugars, like we talked about before. And all of this can disturb the delicate balance of the bacteria in our gut, known as the microbiome. And a healthy microbiome helps digest food, regulates the immune system, and protects against harmful bacteria, right? We want to have a balance in our gut of good and, quote, bad bacteria. But when we have dysbiosis, we have an unbalanced gut. So we have more of the quote unquote bad gut bacteria than the good. A disrupted microbiome, one that's been harmed by medications such as antibiotics, poor diet, or stress, to name a few, can make it harder for the body to process gluten and other proteins, leading to inflammation. And that being said, there's a place for antibiotics and they can often be life-saving. Therefore, you should follow the guidance of your personal healthcare provider who knows you best and can give you the best recommendations for your situation. Um, we are very blessed to have antibiotics available. And there is definitely a need at times, even my own family members and myself. It's just following the direction of your personal healthcare provider or whoever you're seeing to decide if that's something you need at that time, right? But there's lots of things that can disrupt our gut. And so when we take care of our gut health, we're more resilient when we do need things like antibiotics to protect us and cure us and help us survive and thrive. And in the US, we also have diets that are high in processed foods and low in fiber. And when we have that, we have less diversity in our microbiome, which also contributes to an unhealthy gut or poor gut microbiome in recent decades. Our guts just aren't as resilient as they used to be. Actually, guys, fiber is a prebiotic food that feeds the good gut bacteria. So having a diet that is low in fiber, we're not giving the nutrition that the good gut bacteria needs to thrive. And actually, the quote unquote bad gut bacteria actually love sugar. So if you're having sugar cravings, that could be part of the reason. So we've got tons of sugar in the diet of the American Western diet, and we don't have enough fiber. And so that's contributing to our unhealthy gut microbiome as well. So guys, where do we go from here? Should everyone eliminate gluten from their diets? Well, I do have a nutrition program that helps detox your gut. It helps replenish your gut microbiome, and it helps support overall decreases in inflammation. And guys, I'm thriving because of this lifestyle. It's holistic, it's sustainable, it's easy. So reach out to me if you're interested in more information so I can work with you one-on-one and see where you're at. And then also you can always check with your own healthcare providers and see what's good for your specific situation. Guys, my mission is simple yet powerful. It's to make a lasting positive impact on your health and wellness. Through education and personalized coaching, I aim to help you create not just a healthy life, but a legacy of generational health where your health span matches your lifespan. If this resonates with you, I invite you to take the first step toward a healthier, more vibrant life. Reach out to me for a free wellness consult, and let's start this transformative journey together. Guys, thanks for your time. I hope this talk helps you navigate the complex relationship between gluten, inflammation, and health with more clarity, and that it brought you value. And here is my disclaimer. This information is for educational purposes only. Both I've utilized different sources as well as my own personal experiences and journey and practice. But this is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. And it is also not intended to replace guidance by your personal healthcare provider who knows you best. Thank you guys. Until next time, please be safe.